On a small island in the Gulf, tens of thousands of tombs rise like waves of stone. This is Dilmun, a lost kingdom at the crossroads of worlds. For 1,000 years it linked Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, and yet it vanished, leaving behind a riddle in the sand. To find Dilmun, follow the ships, the seals, and the copper. Dilmun grew where the Gulf narrows, a natural staging point between river cities and ocean harbors. Its merchants stamped deals on carved seals, tiny contracts that traveled farther than any king. Here, shallow draft boats could beach, unload, and take on fresh water from island springs. From this edge, goods fanned inland by caravan and river barge to cities along the Tigris and Euphrates. Copper from Oman and beyond passed through Dilmun in heavy, green-stained ingots. Carnelian beads from the Indus Valley added color and value to every ledger. Bitumen sealed hulls and jars. Black waterproofing harvested upriver and exported down the coast. Grain, dates, fish, and timber moved with the same tides, each cargo timed to wind and season. Seals and clay tags tracked every bale and jar that changed hands here. Sailors hugged the Gulf's lee shores, steering by islands and stars to avoid open water swell. Routes linked Dilmun to Akkad and Ur in the northwest, and to Lothal and Harappa in the southeast. Pilots knew every mooring stone and tidal notch along this coral shoreline. Coral rock built their quays and warehouses, pale, porous, and salt white in the sun. Trade made Dilmun real. Story made it eternal. In Sumerian texts, Dilmun appears as a place of purity, where sickness and grief do not enter. A clean land at the edge of waters. A meeting of river and sea, fit for gods. Hymns to the goddess Nintsakila praise Dilmun as bright and unblemished, washed by fresh waters. Freshwater springs once rose beneath the Gulf, feeding gardens that sailors sought. To inland scribes, this far shore became a blessed margin, half real harbor, half sacred shore. Seals show palms and thrones, hints of how merchants and myths shared the same symbols. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero seeks Utnapishtim and sails to the edges of the world. The route points toward Dilmun's waters, where immortality is rumored to dwell. The poem makes Dilmun a threshold, not a city to conquer, but a boundary to cross. Alongside Magan and Meluha, Dilmun anchors the epic's geography in lived trade. Beneath the myths stood a working city. Khalat al-Bahrain sat at the water's edge, layered with centuries of building and repair. Storehouses held jars recessed into floors to cool grain, dates, and oil. Streets ran between coral walls, bright in midday and quiet at dusk. Potters tempered clay with shell and sand to make light, durable wares. Textiles twisted from date fiber and wool moved as barter alongside metal and stone. Baskets, pounders, and hearths mark houses that cooked, stored, and traded by the tide. Wells tapped brackish and sweet water that rose and fell with the sea. Date palms anchored gardens, their fruit dried and packed for ship and store. Small channels fed palms and plots whenever spring surged strongest. Fish and shellfish rounded out meals, bound to the same waters that carried trade. Administration spoke in stone. Stamped seals marked owners, offices, and origin. A single press could secure a jar, a room, or a manifest until the buyer arrived. Tallies and tokens traveled with goods across the Gulf's short but vital legs. Behind public quays, quiet rooms kept the city's ledgers in clay and memory. Then there are the graves, more than the island should hold. Tens of thousands of mounds dot Bahrain, from small rings to grand, multi-chambered tombs. Built of limestone and sand, each mound marks a deliberate act of memory. Some districts hold thousands in tight clusters, a landscape remade by the dead. Most date to the early 2nd millennium BC, with earlier and later phases layered across the island. Grave goods are modest, bowls, beads, pins, more domestic than royal. Layouts vary, but most hold single burials in small stone chambers beneath the mound. The count exceeds what Bahrain's population could explain on its own. Some materials echo Mesopotamia, others point south and east toward the Indus. One possibility: people from across the region chose Dilmun as a resting place. Beads and pins hint at mixed lives. Traders, families, and strangers laid in the same soil. Water may be one answer. Springs made Dilmun a rare oasis at sea. Gardens and groves signaled fertility and continuity, powerful symbols for burial. Its mythic purity, a land without disease and song, could have drawn the bereaved. Or economics, a trade hub that standardized rites and offered transport for the dead. Among the simple graves stand elite mounds with concentric walls and multiple rooms. Some use better-cut stone and more careful courses, demanding skilled hands. Inside, passages and side cells suggest lineage tombs reused over time. Hierarchy persists in death, mapped onto the island's ridges and flats. Ritual signatures are restrained. Libation bowls, beads, and pins more than gold. Burnt patches near mound bases hint at offerings made at the threshold. The scale is the spectacle. A necropolis spread wider than many cities. Even crossroads shift. Tides, trade winds, and empires turned. Dilmun's edge wore thin. As the second millennium BC advanced, routes favored other ports along the Gulf. Strata at Qalat al-Bahrain show change. New wares, new hands. With fewer ships, warehouses emptied, and the city's rhythm slowed. The old stamp seal world gave way, one broken impression at a time. In later texts, Dilmun lingers as a name without directions. The island's tombs remained, but the kingdom's voice thinned to whispers. New rulers reused old foundations, their purposes shifting with every course. Sand made its own records, covering, then preserving what the city left behind. Archaeologists reopened Dilmun with trowel and brush, trench by trench. Context tied ceilings to storerooms, and storerooms to ships. In the necropolis, sampling thousands of graves turned landscape into data. Plans and profiles now frame the questions locals always knew were there. Dates cluster around the early 2nd millennium BC, when mound building peaks. Multiple phases stack, earlier small rings, then larger, more complex forms. Metal types shift with time, traceable by their alloys and patina. Layer by layer, Dilmun's rise and slowing pulse appear in the soil. Isotopes trace copper to Oman and beyond, routed through Dilmun's decks. Carnelian's banding, drilled and glossy, speaks a Harappan dialect. Mesopotamian jars turn up in island stores, their shapes foreign but familiar. Every test points the same way. Dilmun sat in the middle, taking its share. Walls ringed the city's mound, their lines rebuilt across centuries. Gate pivots still mark where doors swung, heavy against salt and wind. Channels steered rain and surge away from storerooms. Below, a graded slope met boats as they grounded with the tide. Houses clustered by lanes, with benches, niches, and packed earth floors. Grinding flour and dates set the day's baseline. Cooking fires sat low and efficient against coral walls. Shell and stone ornaments linked sea and self in small, constant ways. At the quay, rope, peg, and pole made and unmade harbors by hand. Catch cooled in baskets while ledger marks dried on clay in the sun. Departures waited for wind shifts that turned the Gulf into a road. Dilmun shared waters with island and mainland nodes, Failaka, Tarut, and the Omani Capes. Seals echo across sites, patterns repeating with local accents. Sailors threaded these points in stages, sleeping where the lee allowed. Even anchors wore a shared design, cut to bite coral and hold. Coastlines shifted with silt and sea level, opening and closing harbors. Salt crept into stone and soil, challenging fields and walls alike. Cores read the past shoreline in pollen, salt, and shell dust. Through it all, palms and people adapted to a warm, shifting edge. Later settlers built on Dilmun's bones, reusing blocks, routes, and habits. In museums, its pieces sit between better-known empires, modest but persistent. On Bahrain, the necropolis endures as a second horizon beside roads and rooftops. A name once mythic, now mapped again. Why did so many choose this island for burial? Status, origin, and season vary. But the draw outlasted any dynasty. Perhaps the answer is ordinary. A safe harbor where lives ended as voyages do. Ashore. Dilmun tied rivers to ocean, markets to myths, and people to place. Its city worked the tides. Its stories lifted horizons. In stone, in sand, and in words, it remains. and the riddle of its graves keeps the island speaking. A new lost world every week.